Good morning, everyone. I'm Utkarsh, the founder of Network Capital, and today it's my pleasure to have Jean-Philippe Courtois, who doesn't need an introduction, but he's the Executive Vice President of Microsoft and the President of Global Sales and Marketing, in addition to being the founder of Live for Good. He's been a mentor to me and many other millennials at Microsoft and beyond, and today we are here to do a deep dive on his career. Jean-Philippe, welcome to Network Capital. Delighted to see you here today.
Utkarsh, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation together.
Yes. I just want to tell you before we get started, I penned down a piece, what I learned from Jean-Philippe Courtois on Network Capital as a blog, and it has got about 90,000 hits in a day. I put it on yesterday. So clearly there's a lot of appetite. People want to learn from you. So Jean-Philippe, let's dive straight in. Tell us how your leadership style has evolved within Microsoft.
Yeah, I must admit, my leadership style has changed quite a bit, Utkarsh. When I started, Microsoft was essentially, back many years ago, in '84, a startup. So just about a few hundred people. And I got to learn by doing stuff, doing mistakes as well, and leading actually new business for Microsoft, expanding in Southern Europe and so on and so forth. As I grew up through the management ranks and the opportunity to lead the development of our international markets for many years and open many subsidiaries across the world where we run our operations, I would tell you, I was super anxious to really master how can I really manage such a high-scale business effectively. You think about it, you've got all time zones of the world, from India to Mexico and everything in between. and clearly what I got to do, what I got to learn was to put in place some really what I would call management systems. So systems really relying a lot on command and control, dashboards, a lot of top-down commands in a way, because I wanted to operate effectively across 14 regional areas. And I did that for many years, and I thought that was actually quite okay to continue to do that. But I realized a few years back, particularly as our company was going through a massive transformation, 6 years back, 5 years back, I need to change and reinvent in a way the way I could really lead and inspire the teams to achieve more for our customers. And in many ways, I think the way I reflect on that is very aligned with the purpose of the company. It starts always the purpose, and you always need to connect, I think, your own personal purpose with the purpose of the company or the organization you are working with, or you're leading in your case, if you create your own startup or own company. And in my case, I could certainly connect myself to that statement we have as a company, Microsoft, empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. But doing that in my day-to-day management leadership means changing the way I was doing things. And so what I did was literally to start taking on some symbolic moves. So I basically suppressed the largest meeting ever we had at the company for running the business. We had a 7 weeks process for a couple of decades called the media review at Microsoft, where we used to lock ourselves in rooms for 7 weeks, in a row to go, yes, not that, to really go into tons of data, tons of details, tons of spreadsheets, and really exhaust our people with a lot of insights, but a lot of pain in the process, a lot of time not used. I decided to shift and suppress that altogether. I decided to put in place some connects where I'm trying to really move to more of a coach-like leader, which means really a few things. Number one is being curious all the time. And as you know, you can be curious with your people, with your loved ones, with anyone you connect with, you meet with externally as well in your community world or in the society you are belonging to. And I decided to stop talking and having a much better place for listening. Number two, be often in that coaching posture, meaning you don't need to wait for one-on-one, that is really cadence every couple of weeks or week. You can do a real-time coaching, which is very beneficial, which could be a few minutes. When you see things happening and you believe that by asking questions as opposed to finding a solution can help the talents, the people you have working with you and the teams. So the coaching habit is something I've been working a lot on more, Utkarsh, last couple of years, to basically let the people come up with their problem statements. Because as you know well, the first time they come up with a problem is probably not the right formulation. You got to ask them again, not just what is on your mind, but what else? Truly, Utkarsh, what else is on your mind? And what is it that you really want to make having a big impact on? And what is so critical in your own personal, view that you need to address? And that's a very different discussion. That's a very different platform for exchanging, developing, listening to people so that they can achieve more. And that's really what I'm trying to practice a lot more. And in many ways, it is very aligned as well with some leadership principles we try to develop as a company, which are really threefold. It's about clarity, driving clarity. I mean, that's so critical, not leaving things in ambiguity. Two is really propagating a positive energy with the people so that, when we are with them, we are truly with them, and you leave them with a positive momentum, positive excitement, positive vibes. And number three, helping them to drive success in the way they define success, not necessarily exactly the way you always define success yourself. So that's what I've been trying to practice for the last few years, and clearly changing a bit the way I behave as a leader.
And, I've seen you in action. It's very much, your actions speak louder than your words. Tell us, Jean-Philippe, if you were to really step back when you joined the company, you were fairly young, and you're still young at heart, but what are the lessons that you learned as your leadership style has evolved? Any mega takeaways for millennials?
Yeah, I think a few things I would say. Honestly, I didn't realize young enough, and that's something certainly I would share with any millennials as well, that indeed you should feel uncomfortable. It's okay to feel uncomfortable, meaning that if you don't expose yourself to new things, to new adventures in a professional way, in a personal way as well, it means that you're probably not pushing you hard enough in terms of fulfilling your own development. So going into the uncomfortable, taking some risk, making mistakes, something, I had a very hard time to deal with when I was younger, to be honest. I wanted to be perfect in everything I was doing. I wanted to manage every single risk from the smallest to the biggest. And that's something you realize, I think, over the years, that this is not necessarily the best energy you should apply to problems, to solutions, to engagement. So that's something I got to learn a lot. Certainly something else as well is the way you really want to embark people as well on a joint vision, on a joint mission, whatever you want to call that, on the way you want collectively to have an impact on a business, on society, whatever it is that you care for actually as a leader. There's certainly something I realize as well. How long does it take to create the conditions of not just alignment, because alignment is almost like a passive word, but really of embracing together something that gets people excited about in every day of their jobs as well. And at the end of the day, it's about confronting yourself with who you are and really look at yourself in the mirror and be able or challenging you with some of the friends and people you trust on the kind of change you want to see happening with yourself. We have this very famous quote from Tolstoy, which I like using a bit, who said, everyone thinks about changing the world, right? But no one thinks about changing himself. And I think it's so true because it's hard and it's painful. So you need to go through that pain to reinvent yourself and learn through the process.
Right. That's such a fascinating answer. Jean-Philippe, a quick follow-up on that. Is trying to be perfect, or when you were trying to be perfect all the time, was it a cause of anxiety? And if yes, how did you overcome that?
Yes, it was actually driving kind of my adrenaline, right? Because every moment I wanted to prepare for the next activity, the next action, and manage my environment in such a way that I could really feel confident, 100% confident before doing things. And it was almost paralyzing, I would tell you. I learned certainly over the years that you don't need to be perfect because actually no one is perfect by far, never,
Right.
ever. But you need to create the condition for your confidence. And confidence is built, by the way, on the way you do things, but also the way you get feedback in return with the people you work with the environment you are working through, and having this positive feedback loop into you as a young talent, as a manager, whatever, whoever you are in your career, wherever you're in career, is critical. And so that's certainly something I learned to lower the anxiety level for me and feel it okay not to be perfect anymore.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. Um, Can you talk to us a bit about cultural intelligence? Microsoft works across almost all countries around the world. You've also had a very international background. Tell us, what does that mean to you and how do you practice it in day-to-day life?
Yeah, I would say culture is a big deal. It's not just a big word, Utkarsh, because what I found is there's no transformation of a company, of a business, of the society, again, whatever is your dream in terms of transformation, without a cultural transformation. So it really means you need to be intentional about what is culture, how you define it, what can you do about it as a leader or as a participant to an organization yourself. And to me, culture is really the combination of a number of things. It is, in a way, the way you translate by your behaviors the value system you carry as a leader or as an organization. You know, sometimes companies come up with nice words in the halls of their headquarters. You come in and you see all those big words. You say, wow, that sounds really nice. But the next test is really to look into, how are the people behaving actually? and do they mean those big words like, I don't know, as an example, respect, which is a big word. So actually one of our core values as a company. What do you mean by respect? I can tell you Microsoft as an example. We spend months and months having discussions within ourselves on what do we mean by respect. and of course, you got to listen and immerse yourself with very different types of people, backgrounds, ethnics, all kind of diversity to understand they may have a different viewpoint than you have on the value system. So I would say, coming back to again, that discussion, be intentional on the culture and the way you really create the right conditions for that to flourish. And in my career, I had the opportunity to travel the world so many times, Utkarsh. Today, I do that on Teams virtually every single day, many times a day. Different.
You were in UK, we saw?
Yeah, I was traveling in UK with my team and many great customers just a couple of days ago. Was wonderful, actually. But I can tell you, I learned so much being exposed to so different cultures, all the way from Japan to, again, Brazil and many things in between on the low context culture, the high context culture. I think you can refer to those terms, right, from Erin Mayer, which I think you're a big fan of as well, which I've met with.
Yeah, I went to INSEAD, so yes.
Yeah, and I really could relate to her book and in the way I was myself coming into the discussions, creating a high context for creating a long-lasting relationship with a Japanese executive. Well, that takes some work. That takes many cycles to learn or to create that trusted relationships. And the way you may go to a meeting just to bow and just to apologize for 5 minutes and maybe come back a few months later for another meeting where you can explain a little bit more and try to start building some other bonds. And so clearly that contextual awareness of different cultures, which are both societal differences, which are also people identities differences, because even people in any given country in the world, we're going through this massive diversity inclusion, I would say, questioning as a company, like any company should do globally on the planet. There's a lot of work we need to do to be aware, learn, representative of the world we live in and make sense and connect with that broader community of talents.
What I love about this answer is that you made this sound as a practice skill. Is that something that you can learn with deliberate practice? So each of us who are in different parts of the world can learn and apply it, contextualize it, and see how that works. So that's something that I appreciated a lot. Jean-Philippe, when you think of corporate impact on one hand, social impact on the other hand, why do you think that they are complementary? Are they complementary?
I have a deep belief, Utkarsh, that companies, corporations, and you can use different names, should have a deep sense of accountability to actually 5 different constituencies or 5 different assets they have. One, of course, you could say, and people think about that immediately, the shareholders and the financial capital, the equity and the debt, and the way they should, of course, perform because of the expectations shareholders have on the company. Then it's about the people capital, because at the end of the day, if you don't attract, develop, grow the people capital, there's nothing you can do. You've got also clearly the material capital, the physical assets you possess, you own, what you're going to do about it. You've got the social capital, which is the way you create a trusted actually connection and enablement of the community, society you live in, understand your contribution. And the last one is a natural environment capital, which is, of course, environment, which is so big. And it's interesting to see that I was reading an interesting book recently, Prosperity is the name of the book. And, and there was a reference to the history of the formation of enterprise. And you have to go all the way to Roman ages, where Romans really invented the societas and also invented the collegium. And they finally invented what they call Societas Publicanorum, which is a form of legal entity at the time, which was really aligning together commercial activities and public goods. And when you think about public goods these days, think about the pandemic. Think about what we're all learning as citizens, as professionals, in terms of what is the most precious things for all of us, health, and of course, environment coming next as well. You've got really to think much harder about the way you need to respond to those challenges as a company as well. So I'm deeply privileged because working at Microsoft today, it's not just a mission statement, which I talked about before. Yeah. It's about the way we try to apply the best of our people skills, the best of our technology, and of course, some of our capital as well, financials, to help out the world. And we are trying to do that in a couple of ways today. Skilling, reaching out and enabling 25 million people in the world to reskill, upskill, to get access to jobs, which as we know is critical in the years to come, post-pandemic. And certainly doing the same when it comes to sustainability at a broad scale. And so I'm deeply convinced, and of course with my own work with Live for Good as a social foundation, that each one of us, whatever persona we have in our life, needs to really care for those dimensions of the public goods, or we could call the common goods around ourselves. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to respond to those huge needs of our planet altogether.
So well said. I don't know if you remember in one of the Davos panels, you told us global shapers that talent is equally distributed, but opportunities are not. And I see it every day in the work that Microsoft does and the work Live for Good does. But now I want to know what keeps you up at night.
Usually I sleep really well, Utkarsh, at night. Which is good. It has really served me well. But honestly, again, coming back in a way to what is kind of top of my mind, really, after I just wake up in the morning, is what is the positive impact I can derive today,
right?
In what I'm about to do in my life today, in the hours I've decided to spend on. At the end of the day, you make a choice. You make a choice to having a job, to staying in a job, to create your company, just like you did, which I think is a wonderful alignment of your own planets, I guess, with your purpose and what you contribute to. And I think that's so true. So when I wake up, I'm trying really, literally day by day, but then of course looking ahead next weeks, months, kind of year to come. What are the unique moments and in which moments today I'm going to learn from, and I'm going to also be able to give to in a way or another, in different shapes or forms, and I fulfill myself doing that, and of course trying to be humble as well about how much can I really give and can I really contribute to sometimes to some very big problems, of course, that many other people, constituencies will need to come out together to solve.
That's fascinating. Jean-Philippe, you have a busy work schedule. Microsoft, all countries, live for good. How do you believe in work-life balance, or what's your thought process around that subject?
I think more than ever, we all need to be extremely strategic about our time allocation, more than ever. I've been always a bit religious about the way I spend my time, but I will tell you, over the past years, even more so. So at the end of the day, I think each one of us may have a different definition of that balance. We need to recognize that. We are not the same. We are not wired the same way, didn't grow up in the same ways and the same working or not working values and other values we have. So we need to make sure that the way we spend time fulfill ourselves, meaning, am I actually feeling good after a meeting, after a set of activities? Did I get some positive energy coming out of that event? Or am I actually down? Am I actually depressed because I did something that I don't like? And I would not like to do that again. So I think we need to be intentional. In my case, I've tried to really plan along those lines. So I'm really trying to give the best I can to my global function for Microsoft, while also allocating, in a very planful way, time for live for good, to understand the way we can grow, the impact on hundreds and thousands of social entrepreneurs in France and beyond, hopefully, and building some platform capabilities to achieve that, and also work on a couple of other boards which I belong to add the value. Why? Having, which is a beauty, at least the good news out of the pandemic. There's some good news. I know there are some other less good news. I can have dinner with my family, Utkarsh, every night these days, which is something I cherish and I couldn't do for so many years because I was just traveling the world. So that is the balance I found, which I kind of like, actually. And I think each one of us needs just to look at that, the way we want to dedicate our time to basically what we want, where we want to make a difference.
So very well put, Jean-Philippe. Network Capital's mission is to democratize inspiration. We are, of course, building out of Microsoft. I'm a proud alum. I want to know who've been your mentors, and what do you think constitutes a good mentor-mentee relationship?
I'm not sure at any time a real mentor per se, but a number of people that I certainly learn a lot from. I mean, starting with my dad, to be honest, when I was younger and when my dad was still alive, I was certainly I could learn a lot from my dad in terms of his work ethics, in terms of the way he had some very strong values, again, integrity, on the way he wanted as well to be balanced between his work, his family, but also the community needs as well. And so that has served me well. Then in my professional environment, certainly looked up to some people around myself who learned and taught me basically how to be customer obsessed. For many years, we've been using those words recently, but I would say I've learned in the early days from one of our leaders who fortunately left us, late Michel Lacombe was a wonderful manager of Microsoft France many years back in EMEA. And he was so wonderful in smiling with customers, in really creating that trusting relationship and listening and helping them out. So yes, there's again some more. I think from a mentorship standpoint now, or coaching, I'm a strong believer in that. And so I'm really allocating my time as well, not just within Microsoft. I actually do that with social entrepreneurs. I've got a cohort of entrepreneurs. I'm usually coaching over the weekends, I must admit, to help them so that they can ask themselves the big questions about the way they want to change the world for a better world. And so that, to me, the value of that, in a way, a value of reverse coaching, in a way, because I learn from them a ton, because they come up with clearly a new view of the world, of societal issues, technology as well, innovation, basically with very frugal innovation, with very little money, if not at all. That changed me the perspective, of course, with Microsoft the other day, and during the weekends, finding out, oh, actually, you can do a lot with very little and still have a big impact, which to me is a good reassurance of the quality you need to find in those mentorships or coaching relationships you want to create.
Yeah, and I see that you're doing this work-life energy and mission harmony. I mean, we talked about work-life balance, but I think that's what you're trying to do. Now is the time for the googly round, Jean-Philippe. Tell us one thing that you believe in that others often disagree with.
I think in a way that that search for truly unleashing the value of that societal innovation in almost everything we do is something I would say that many people can kind of like, of course, but it would tell me, JP, no, I mean, you're pushing too much the envelope. It doesn't make sense here. Shouldn't spend too much time on that. Or, that's another discussion, separate discussion. So in a way, coming back to some of the words you just used, finding harmony in the way I'm trying to reconcile and align the purpose that people have, that organizations have in what they want to achieve, and the way we can co-develop that value, not just from a technology standpoint, not just from an economic standpoint, of course, which makes sense financially, but also from a social, societal standpoint, is certainly something that is not necessarily, that is not suddenly agreed by everyone, I know for sure. But I'm an optimistic Utkarsh, so I believe that's something I can keep working on, probably to help achieving some of that together.
Yeah, I wrote about exactly this topic of being a constructive contrarian in my last Harvard Business Review piece. I'm going to quote that as an additional example. Thank you. I personally resonated a lot with what you just said. Last question, Jean-Philippe. What advice you wish somebody gave you at 18 and 25? This is the demographic which is very heavily represented on Network Capital, so we would love your parting advice on this.
Yeah, great question. I think at 18 is probably someone who would ask me, what else you need to keep learning, Jean-Philippe JP? What else you need to keep learning? Because, I was really eager to join a business school, to do things. Yeah, but I had too much of a restricted view of the learning path. It was too much like an academic kind of career step, graduate, and then, then I'm going to join the professional world. Well, I wish I had someone who pushed me saying, well, maybe you need to learn more of this and that, and not just the traditional path. That's one. I think at 25, because you cannot waste more years. Indeed, you're right. I would start really pushing to make sure that, each one of us at 25, I would say, would really acknowledge at the best they can what are their true passions, what are their true strengths. And this is based on the feedback. So it's also called self-awareness, that you build with others. And make sure you really bring the best of your passion, of your strengths, where you get so much positive energy when you do things, when you are really in the flow of doing things in a super way, and then really use that as a platform to truly pick the few things you want to do in your life, at least in the coming years. You should not do a plan for the next 10 years. It's crazy these days, which is something probably our generation did a lot of.
Changes, yes.
It is crazy. What is it you're going to do make a difference the next 1 to 3 years, and where your passion, your strengths can really make it happen, because this is what's going to drive you to the next step.
Jean-Philippe, thank you very much. This was such an inspiring conversation, and I cannot wait to share it with the 100,000 strong network capital community. We really appreciate your time, your energy, and inspiration. We really appreciate your insights. Thanks so much for doing this. Network Capital is all about democratizing mentorship, and it's all because of leaders like you. Thank you.
Utkarsh, thank you so much for having me.